My name is Bob Weiss. I'm pwcrack. I'm Senior Security Engineer for Tenacity Solutions. I'm also the founder of Password Crackers and DEFCON Goon. Thanks to our sponsors, without whom we would not be here today. So spent some time finding them and talking to them about their products. They're very generous, and we don't have a con without them. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Bitcoin. But in order to understand that, first let's talk about what is money. So money is any sort of standard of exchange or store of value that we can use to exchange, to do transactions. Anything can be used as money, and obviously lots of things have been used as money. Dollars would be one of those. Gold, wood chips, a rock, pretty much anything, right? As long as it is accepted by all of us, it can be money. And currency is a little bit more specific version of money. Currency would be money in circulation. It's the tool or the thing that we use to do the transaction. So that is your physical dollar or your bank account or something along those lines. So that's what currency is. And obviously coin is a type of currency. So monetary policy. So countries issue currency, which we can then all use as money for transactions. And they want to try to manage the economy. They want to try to improve the economy, make it more stable, make it more predictable. And obviously they also want to improve our economy relative to other economies. So in order to do this, they stand up central banks, and central banks try to manipulate the money supply in order to stabilize the currency so that we can all have a nice economy. In the United States, that's the Fed, and the Fed has multiple tools that they use to do this. Think of the Fed as having three levers that they can pull to manipulate the economy. There's the big lever over here, right? It's your gross control, and you kind of don't want to touch that, right? Because you move that lever, big changes in the economy are going to happen. And you've got a middle lever, and then you've got a smaller lever, which is your finer control. And you can tweak the fine control, it's okay. And if there's a big downturn in the economy, you can go to the middle lever. But you want to stay away from that lever on my left. That's going to cause big changes in the economy. But you can pull that lever if you need to. So your lever on the right, your fine control, is open market operations. The Fed will buy or sell treasury bills, bonds, bills, things like that. Not stocks and bonds typically, though since the financial crisis a couple of years ago, they now do own some stocks and bonds, but that's not their desire. They'll buy and sell those in the open market. So at any given point in time, the Fed is trying to hit a particular target, and they may buy some stuff and they might sell some stuff, and they can kind of do that without having a significant effect, but they do that to try to fine-tune where they're going. Their middle lever is Fed funds rate. That's the overnight rate that they charge to banks who need to borrow money. And they can tweak that. That's when you see, every sort of quarter, the Fed will come out and say we're keeping the Fed funds rate the same, or we're increasing it by 0.25%. If there's a big shock to the economy or some major event, they may go up or down, as much as 0.5%. That Fed funds rate's been down near zero for the last couple of years. And that's your middle lever. That can have a significant impact on the economy, and obviously banks and Wall Street watch that fairly carefully. That big lever on the left is reserve requirements. That's the amount of money that they require banks to keep on hand to back up the loans that they make. You move the reserve requirement lever, and you're going to have a big impact on the economy. Right? So that's basically how the Fed manipulates things. They're doing this all the time. A lot of people say, oh, the Fed prints money, right? They don't really print money. It is one of the functions, and money does get printed, and the Fed does put it into circulation. But they're going to print currency basically to satisfy our requirement for how many physical dollars that we need to move around, which is a microscopic piece of what we use and the money that we have on a given day. And basically, they're going to print physical money based upon how fast money is wearing out, right? So, dollar bills wear out, and banks take the bad dollar bills out of circulation and send them back to the Fed, where they're destroyed and replaced with new dollar bills. Obviously, the population is growing. There's more of us, so we need more dollars over time. But it's a very small effect, right? So they're doing that. And the Fed also puts into circulation coin, quarters, nickels, dimes, etc. And coin is a little bit different than dollars. You can print dollars, and we put dollars into circulation, paper dollars into circulation for the Fed, and they just become a liability on the books of the U.S. Treasury. Coin is an asset of the U.S. Treasury. Effectively, the U.S. Treasury mints coin. So the coins become an asset. The Fed needs to buy them from the U.S. Treasury, and then the Fed puts them into circulation. When they come out of circulation, they reverse the process. So at a given point in time, there's a relatively small dollar volume of coin in circulation. It doesn't really affect the money supply or affect the economy. But when you do hear things about minting $1 billion coins so we don't have to shut down the government, that's where this comes from. And who's familiar with that? Okay, a couple people have at least heard about that. Let me go backwards. Let's keep this informal. If you have any questions, just shout them out, raise your hand, whatever. Yeah, because of the way that coin is handled relative to dollars, if the Treasury were to mint a platinum $1 billion coin, and it doesn't need to be big, it can be any size, we don't really care. They just say it's now worth $1 billion. That immediately becomes an asset of the Treasury. I'm sorry, it wouldn't be $1 billion, it'd be $1 trillion, right? $1 billion is really not going to cut it. We can make $1 trillion coin. It would immediately become an asset of the Treasury and could be used to offset debt. So basically, the Treasury just has $1 billion more than they did yesterday. Then they would sell it to the Fed, who would give them $1 trillion and put the coin into circulation by putting it in a hole in some vault in the Fed, right? No one's going to go get this $1 trillion coin. But the bottom line is the U.S. government now has more money, and we can keep the government open, right? So pretty stupid idea. Most people have not thought that this is an excellent plan, but theoretically, in the event of emergency, it is a possibility. So all these different central banks, including the Fed, are trying to manipulate the money. They're trying to make the economy better for all of us. How's this going to work, right? So they manipulate it, and the only way for me to grow my economy faster than Germany grows their economy is for me to juice that lever a little bit faster than the other guy's willing to juice his lever, right? I'm going to issue more money. I'm going to inflate my currency faster. My citizens get a better standard of living relative to everybody else. My currency does better. So that's a win for me. And that's what the Fed wants to try to do. Of course, the Bundesbank is also trying to do that, and Japanese are trying to do that, and China's trying to do that, and everyone. So the bottom line is the only strategy that wins there is what's called beggar thy neighbor. Basically, I have to be willing to juice my currency faster than everyone else is willing to juice their currency, and therefore I can have a better economy and a better standard of living for my citizens, basically, but at the expense of everybody else. Right now, all the central banks hold the currencies of all of the other central banks. Right, so China holds our currency, and we hold Germany, and we hold pounds, and London holds dollars, and everyone holds dollars. So the bottom line is it's really kind of impossible to do this, right? But central bankers think that they can accomplish this task, and they persist in manipulating the economy in order to accomplish this. It's pretty much of a big fail. And what it does is it introduces a lot of uncertainty into the economy, because nobody knows what the central bank's going to be doing next. No one knows who's going to say, you know, well, screw you guys, we're going to inflate our currency faster than you guys. So you start pricing in uncertainty. You start pricing in risk, and that causes all the currencies to do worse than they might do if you just didn't do anything. So what does this mean to you? Typically, normal person is going to have most of their assets in their home currency. Right? So your assets, people in this audience, most of your money is in dollars. Right? For the vast majority of Americans, not necessarily hackers, but the vast majority of Americans, your biggest asset is your house, and your house is valued in dollars. It's not only valued in dollars because you want it to be valued in dollars, it's valued in dollars because the potential buyer of your house, if you ever decided to sell it, would be buying it in dollars. We all hold dollars, and most of the stuff that we have is in dollars. Right? Now that's pretty good for us, right? Because the dollar is also the world reserve currency. Everyone holds dollars. If you had to pick a currency, if you were sitting here and you said, hey, I can pick any currency I want to be in, dollars would be a pretty good choice. Right? If you happen to be in Germany or London or Japan, you're probably going to hold one of those currencies. Most of your assets will be in that, and you might want to be more diversified, right? If you're sitting in Indonesia or Thailand or South Africa, you have a real problem, right? Your currency really blows, and it's not a very stable store of value. It's not good. It's not serving its purpose as money. So you're actually going to spend some time understanding where your currency is relative to a better store of value. And you're going to spend both some time and some money converting into and out of that. You want to protect yourself. All right? And that's a little bit hard for you to do, or it costs you time, it costs you money. You're going to have to pay some commissions to get that protection. So the manipulation of the currencies, they try to be benevolent, probably not going to succeed. You guys are probably in an okay position because you're holding dollars, which is a good choice, but not an ideal choice. And other people, as you get away from that, worse and worse choices. So you got U.S. currencies and the sort of the major world economies. Well, what else could be money? Are there any kind of other alternative or pseudo currencies that we can use? So yeah, pretty much anything can be a currency, right? If it's accepted, it's an accepted store of value that we all agree to use. So one was called Beans, was this thing started by Larry Ellison in the early 1990s, and you would earn beans for logging into websites or clicking on ads or doing things like that. And during the dot-com bubble, of course, everyone thought this was a brilliant idea. Beans, of course, went out of business. Flues was another one, another alternative currency. People would buy flues with cash, and then they would use their flues instead of credit cards to buy stuff online and from other participating retailers. Like, who the fuck thinks that's a good idea, right? It's the stupidest thing ever, right? I gotta buy flues with cash, and then I can use flues just like cash. That's fantastic. So, really stupid idea, right? But there is one use case, turns out, that was that flues was ideal for, and that was credit card fraud. Turns out that if you need to launder stolen credit card transactions through some currency in order to anonymize yourself, flues is brilliantly perfect for that. So it basically became the currency of choice for laundering credit card transactions, and eventually it was shut down and they flamed out, both flamed out in April. Gift cards is another alternative currency. We have gift cards today. Obviously they're pretty popular, and there are multiple gift card exchanges. Don't buy your gift cards at Walmart and pay full price for them, or wherever you want to buy them. Go onto the gift card exchanges, and depending on the rules of the card, whether or not it expires, the pricing at that retailer, how many people buy and give them as gifts that don't need them. Those things, there's a secondary market for these things. You can buy and sell them. You can typically get them for 10 to 20% off. Something like an Amazon gift card, you're not going to get 10% off, right? You're going to get 1 to 5% off, right? Because Amazon, you have a broad diversity of products. It never expires. They deliver it free to your house. It's almost as good as cash, right? But at Abercrombie and Fitch, you can get those things 10% under, and some of the ones that expire you can get for less.
Not just the expiration, but they do deprecate over time, self-deprecate.
Right. So yeah, it'll depend on the rules for each retailer and what you're actually buying. Yeah, again, it's another alternative currency, right? It's something else that we can all use as money. So if you start thinking about this, go ahead.
What about those? I saw that Facebook notes you made there. What about those currencies people use for gaming on Facebook?
Sure.
That's.
So I'll get a little bit into the gaming stuff, but yeah, multiplayer online games, massively big games. They have sort of internal game currencies and assets, right? And to the extent that someone else out there is willing to pay you X to get a certain level or to buy a Sword of Doom, great. Then Sword of Doom has value and it can be traded, right? And it is an alternative currency. Whatever. Does anyone play a game and have an actual thing that they would buy sell? I have no idea what they
Sword of Doom now.
Before.
Is it a +5 Sword of Doom?
I don't know. So.
Yeah, a lot of stuff has value. There's stories going back to the beginning of World of Warcraft, people selling off level 60 characters.
Right.
And then Blizzard promptly disabled the accounts because it was against the terms of service.
Right.
So they stopped using eBay and started using back channels to do it. You have Second Life, which is built on their own currency, the Linden, I think it's called.
Right.
Which is convertible to.
Yeah, which you can trade in and out of currency. At this point, all these presents you can use to
Sure.
buy them.
And you can use it to buy real estate on Second Life, clothing, cars, tools, all kinds of things. Right.
There's a whole
Right.
market
And
don't have a good first life.
all of which is completely worthless unless someone else is willing to pay you for it, right? And that's all that money is, right? And this is a key principle, right, guys? Is that the dollar is completely freaking worthless, except that we have all decided to accept it. And obviously, as we get to Bitcoin, right, this is something that we need to understand. This is no more or less acceptable than the Sword of Doom. If we agree the Sword of Doom equals $20, then it does, right? And if we decide tomorrow it isn't, then it isn't. It's really about us and our willingness to accept these other alternatives. So if you think about sort of, well, what would make good money, right? What are the goals that we're trying to get to with a money system or with a currency system? So here's 7, right? Scarcity. You can't be able to make a lot more of it, right? Choosing a pebble to represent the dollar is probably not going to be a great idea because there's lots of pebbles, right? I can just go get some. Portability. If we decided we're gonna go on the gold standard or we're gonna exchange gold, but you need to physically bring it to me, it's gonna be hard, right? You're gonna be walking around with a lot of gold, right? It's heavy. So we want it to be portable, durable. We don't want it to wear out. It needs to be able to be transferred. Fungible. We have to be able to divide it up into little pieces. We want it to be secure. We don't want it to be able to be forgeable. We want to be able to trust it. It has to have integrity. We want it to be easy to identify, easy to hide, difficult to confiscate or counterfeit. Divisibility can be divided into smaller units and then combined back into larger units. That's what we're looking for, right? This is A currency that has all of these properties would be a good currency. And the dollar has a lot of these, right? Maybe they've improved the security, right? Maybe the security wasn't so good 20 years ago, but that's gotten a little bit better.
Scarcity's out the window.
Right. Well, and stable value, right? Fed's kind of manipulating it all over. I think there's something. So difficult to confiscate. It's going to be an issue, right? Anything that's issued by the government. But this is what we're looking for, and that's fairly understandable. So let's diverge a little bit, talk about what's a proof of work scheme. So proof of work scheme is anything that is hard for me to do, that requires some level of effort for me to accomplish. Hashing something over and over again on a computer obviously would be a difficult project, and there we go. Sorry. Out of order. So this is not what we're not talking about is something like a CAPTCHA, which would prove that you're a human. This is something that proves that you've put some effort into something. So so one of the sort of well-known proof of work schemes is something called Hashcash. Let's say I want to send a janitor an email, and he doesn't want to get a lot of spam. So he wants to know that this is kind of a real email. One of the things that I could do is I could spend 5 minutes hashing that email many billions of times and send him the hash in such a way it's easy for him to check it. He doesn't have to spend 5 minutes to check the hash, but it was hard for me to generate it. That's what Hashcash is. And that doesn't get him anything, except that he knows that it was important enough to me to send that email that I was willing to put some effort and some work into it. And that might translate to him to be able to say, I will, okay, I'll read that email, right? And there are multiple spam systems that use the Hashcash system right now. And Hashcash is the same proof of work system that underlies Bitcoin as well.
So what is it, computer-based, or is it so that you actually yourself
So
put some time on the email?
so Hashcash and both Hashcash and Bitcoin and hashing, right? That's going to be computer-based, right? That's I'm going to use my computer to do a series of transactions which are hard to do, which are understood to be hard. But a proof of work scheme obviously could be anything, right? So I could say, you know, I don't want to talk to you until you run around the track 5 times, and you know, here need you to check in. Well, so security guards have to check in at the check-in stations all around the building, right? So I know that they have completed their rounds because I have a series of transactions of them checking in. So it doesn't need to be computer-based,
So
but
then what prevents the Hashcash from being faked and a spammer using Hashcash?
the algorithm itself, right, it's going to take a certain number of CPU cycles or GPU cycles in order to do this. So a spammer can do it, right? It's just that, well, now he can't send 1 billion pieces of spam. He can only send 5,000 or 10,000, right? It's going to be harder for them to do it, and that's what stopped the spammer from doing that, right? That was the goal that we were trying to get to. It was just some indication that this is important. All right, so what is Bitcoin? So Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. It's decentralized, peer-to-peer verified, completely voluntary. It is defined by a chain of digitally signed transactions called the blockchain. The blockchain is the entire list of all transactions ever in Bitcoin from the first one for forever. And Bitcoin started in 2009 with what you would call the Genesis transaction. The inventor basically gave himself 50 Bitcoin, kicked it off, At that point, mining started, and Bitcoin transactions started being verified, and the entire economy has grown from that. And every single one of those transactions and transfers is in the blockchain. And it's completely public and completely accessible and ready to be verified. Bitcoins, so what is a Bitcoin itself? Bitcoin is a piece of value. In and of itself, it isn't anything. It's tied to an address. Bitcoin is always stored in an address. An address is somewhat analogous, but not very analogous to a bank account. Right? So you would put dollars into a certain account, and that account would have a number. Right? We kind of get that model. A Bitcoin address is a public-private key pair, where I would give you a public key, and that would be the address that you can send me money to my account, and you could send me two Bitcoin or 1 Bitcoin to my public address that I've given to you. However, in order to spend it, I need to sign that with the private key, which only I have, and I would use it to then send from that address. So at some level, an address is like an account. However, I as an individual, company, whatever, I can have hundreds or thousands of addresses. Every transaction that I do can go into a unique address, and that's going to be important later. So at some level it's like an account, at some level it's also not like an account. It's also the thing that actually creates the Bitcoin. So Satoshi Nakamoto. So in 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto released a paper. The title of the paper was Peer-to-Peer Electronic Cash System. Basically in this, he detailed how the Bitcoin system is going to work, how we're going to verify transactions, how the blockchain would work, how addresses would work, all of the details. Not a particularly cutting-edge piece of crypto that was done. No real new concepts or new crypto primitives. But the thing that was fairly unique in 2009 that was able to be done here was how he put these things together, right? He brought together multiple concepts that had existed and were well known from the outside, and he put them together in a unique way. And the interesting thing is there is no Satoshi Nakamoto. A couple of emails from him in 2009, one as late as 2010, then he drops off the face of the earth. No one's heard from him since. It's a pseudonym. There is no actual person, Satoshi Nakamoto, and nobody knows who wrote the paper, who he is, or what happened to him. And therefore, as we were sort of talking last night, we also don't know kind of who's behind Bitcoin, right? There is nobody behind Bitcoin. If you knew who had started it, you might have at least a better idea sort of their motives, be able to ascribe to them motives. But we don't know anything about who's behind it. If I'd invented it, I'd probably want to be taking credit by this point. I think it's a pretty big deal. Since he hasn't come forward and taken credit for it at this point, I'm kind of assuming that he's not going to, he, she, whatever, we don't know, organization.
To me, that implies that whoever is actually behind it knows that they came out about it.
Right. So, yeah, so let's assume that if you're talking about a person, right, this is a person that knows that if that was released, it's not going to be a good day for them, right? Either they're in violation of some law, or they're going to violate some trust, or, I mean, you know, he could have died, right? We don't know, and he will eventually. If it's an organization, right, the organization wants to not be associated with this, right? So, so we don't know, but you need to know that there is no Satoshi Nakamoto, probably will never be. A Bitcoin can be divided up into smaller pieces, as any good currency or money system can. It can be divided down to 8 decimal places or millions, hundreds of millions, to pieces of hundreds of millions. And each of those hundreds of millions is called a Satoshi. Right? So one Satoshi is 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin. and that's why, because it's his name. So that's it. So I have some. Yeah, we'll do the graphs later. Okay, so there is a finite supply of Bitcoin. This chart was designed by, we'll just go with Satoshi Nakamoto for the time being. Designed by Satoshi Nakamoto to resemble the mining of a hard asset such as gold. Right? When people first started mining gold, it was pretty easy. You could pick it up off the ground, then you had to dig for it, then you had to go find it, then you had to go find it and dig for it, and you had to go deeper and deeper, then you had to start refining it. It got harder and harder to do, and now it's really hard to find gold. Right? So Bitcoin is designed to resemble that loop, and they just said, look, when you mine it right at the beginning, you're going to get a big reward for doing so. As we continue each year, you're going to get less and less of a reward until somewhere out in 2033, we're just going to stop giving you any more Bitcoin. There will be no more. That's it. So the finite number is 40 million. When we hit 40 million Bitcoin, which we will in 2033, there will be no more created ever. That's it. So finite supply, which is one of our good standards of a good piece of good money, right? It's scarce and it's predictable. So this is what we're looking to do. Right now we are here at about 11 million Bitcoin.
So fundamental problem with a limited supply, though, is that if you have an increasing populace and a limited supply, you completely drive up value, which is inflation of the currency.
So you might view it as potentially deflationary. I would argue that there's really no reason why it has to be. Right? So as long as we can mathematically subdivide this, why can't we circulate this stuff fast, right? There's really no reason why it has to be deflationary. The concept of, well, there's a limited supply, so therefore we need to divide it up, and it becomes deflationary, is something that you get as a byproduct of the manipulation of the currency, and that we're all using, like dollars or marks, pounds, whatever. Again, so I don't think it is. However, yeah, there's going to be an element of that, right? And that's one of the factors that we're seeing today, right? The price is going up, right? Everyone knows, been watching me all weekend. I've been watching Bitcoin price like every 5 minutes. I'm now completely addicted to it. Bitcoin had a huge month, right? We'll look at that a little bit later as well. But yeah, it doesn't need to be deflationary, but it could be. And at some point in time, you could get to a point where it should stabilize out. Right? So some of the advantages of Bitcoin, it's irreversible by design. Once we get this, you're not going to be able to undo transactions. You're not going to be able to confiscate the currency. It's obviously very mobile. You're moving bits. It's not heavy. It's anonymous, mostly. Can be very fast. Extremely low cost. The infrastructure that we would need to move this does not require a lot of overhead. So things like credit card fees, banking fees, printing checks, things like that. We don't have all that stuff. Ubiquitous, anywhere, anytime. It does support multiple signatures. So, for instance, if we wanted to say, in order to spend this Bitcoin, Bob and Steve need to both use their public keys in order to do this, we can definitely support that. It's completely transparent, right? Everyone sees every transaction all the time, completely public ledger.
Question.
Yes.
Transparent
And anonymous, right. All right, so I'll think about whether or not I deal with that later on. So it's a good point. It's a good time to deal with that. What is completely transparent is the transaction from an address to another address. We see that, and we can verify the provenance of any Bitcoin back to when it was originally mined. what is anonymous about it is we don't know who owns any particular address. So you're not required to disclose that this is Bob's address. Now, at any given point in time, information about an address may become public. So obviously, if I'm going to take on a transaction, I want to sell, I want to buy a GPU card off of Amazon with Bitcoin. Amazon's going to have to tell me their Amazon address so that I can send them money. I now know one piece of information about Amazon. They have this address. So I can do network analysis of this, and I can look at these different pieces of public information and start to know, oh, well, this is Amazon, this one's also Amazon, this one's Amazon, etc. Maybe I combine these things, I learn what does Amazon have, who are these people are sent money to these addresses, so these are Amazon customers over here. I don't really know who they are. Go ahead.
I know there've been instances of Bitcoin theft. So, Android. So what's built into the system to be able to, I guess, combat potential theft?
Right. So let me get to the theft and hacking a little bit later. But so what you would do to protect your anonymity is always use a new address for every transaction. Right. So you give somebody your address, you take it in, then you transfer it to another address. I might still be able to make an assumption about the address that you transferred it to is also being yours if you're doing that. But if you do that a couple of times, at some point in time, we no longer know what's what. And you could have, again, 500 or 1,000 different addresses in play at any given point in time. There's an unlimited number. And so that's where the anonymity comes from, is obfuscating the transparent part from anything that has any kind of personal identifiable information.
You mentioned low cost specifically for the consumer. What about the miner?
So mining is a different thing. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about what happens for the miner when we get there.
And as far as the blockchain is shared peer-to-peer with all the clients, how is that scalable over time?
I'm not exactly sure. So right now, it's relatively small. It's running on my laptop, and we'll hit that in a second. And so it's over the short run, if you go forward 10, 20 years, it's not going to be an issue. If this really started to take off and became the entire economy, you're really only adding one hash transaction to this. Well, I don't know if it would scale to the size of the entire economy. Obviously, a bigger system could handle it, but at some point in time, it might outgrow my laptop. So I don't know the metrics on exactly when that happens.
Are you saying that every single person that owns Bitcoin would have to have every single transaction of everyone else at any time?
So what you need to own Bitcoin is an address. An address is a public-private key pair, and you could print that on paper, right? So you could put 100 Bitcoin into one address. You have your public key, you have your private key. You could print it to paper. You could be completely off the computer, and you don't need to have the other transactions until you need to spend it, right? When you spend it, you're going to need a wallet. And the wallet manages all of your addresses. You import your key pairs from paper again, or manage them. And the wallet does need to know every transaction. So the answer is yes. At the moment, pretty much you're going to have everyone's transactions in your wallet.
How much space is that taking out?
Go ahead.
It's about 9 gigs initially, and you're looking at right now probably about under 100 meg, like on a really, really bad day. But really good days for a lot of transactions. You're talking maybe 50.
I'm going to fire up my wallet in a second. So.
Well, once you do it, it's fine, but the initial download.
Right. Yeah. The first time you do it, it takes a long time to get caught up. All right. So we had a question about the cost of mining. I think we're good. So again, some of the advantages of Bitcoin, where we're going with that. So Bitcoin wallets, If you go to the bitcoin.org site, there's a couple of wallets that you can download right there. There's basically three types. Wallet you run on your desktop or laptop, computer wallet, a wallet that you run on a mobile phone, and a wallet that you run online from an online provider. They have different security models. Obviously, the most secure is the one you're going to run in your PC, as long as you're backing it up, but you're responsible for it. Bitcoin is lost. The keys are lost. It's lost forever. Online, obviously the online provider is responsible for doing the backup, but if they get hacked, there goes your Bitcoin, right? And that, by the way, that's the #1 hack of Bitcoin right now, is you hack the providers and you steal it from the customers, right? So you put your stuff out there online at your own risk. Go ahead.
Is there no rollback function at all? Like they could,
Nope.
They could have a peer-to-peer decision to roll back the chain.
So
That would be difficult.
you could do that, because there have been twice when that happened, but they haven't done that for theft, at least at this point.
They do it more for bugs.
Right. There was a bug and a compatibility problem. So so where was I? So we had the wallet. Obviously, with the mobile phone, right? You own it. You also require to back it up, and it can be stolen, right? So, sort of just like a token that you would have, you need to be aware of the security of the model that you're using. The online, you're going to need an online provider to convert from dollars to Bitcoin and back. If you never convert in and out of dollars, you can do it with just the wallet on your computer. But if you want to buy Bitcoin, you're going to need an online provider. That's okay. Just don't leave the money there, right?
If the founder doesn't exist, and there's, I guess, peer decisions that go on about rolling back the transactions and stuff like that, like, is there a governing board that oversees the function of Bitcoin? So, like, is there a master file that the transaction is sorting, or everything's just peer?
Everything is peer. It would take everyone doing this. I'm going to escape out of this, and I'm going to open up my wallet. I toyed with what was the best way to demo this, whether or not I wanted to show you a wallet with money in it, or the wallet as you would get it with no money in it. So I decided to go with the second one. 6 to 1, half dozen to another. So when I open this up, you guys can see this, right? When I open this up, this is what's going to happen after a day or two, right? And this is, because I haven't put any money in this, this is out of the box, right? If you download the software, this is what you're getting right from bitcoin.org. I'm sorry, say again?
You said it was 5 gigs of Bitcoin, right?
I think he said 9. So it's the data. It's the data. You're downloading every transaction.
Every transaction that has ever been since the beginning.
Right.
Right?
So now,
You have a copy of it too?
Yeah, everyone has a copy.
In order to work directly on the blockchain, you have to have a copy.
So last time I ran this was 32 hours ago. It says I'm 32 hours behind, and it's going to synchronize with the network, and it's downloading all of those transactions and verifying all of those transactions. And this is the overview page. And basically, the wallet right now it's out of sync. It'll take 15, 20 minutes to catch up. Only because I'm only 32 hours behind, right? If you download this from the beginning, you're going to be, was it like 6 to 9 months behind? It's going to take like half a day, right, for you to catch up. Say again?
How do you do it on your phone without?
That would could kill your phone. So right now it's out of sync, right? But so the wallet thinks right now that it has 0 Bitcoin. Now it does, right? But theoretically, if in the last 28 hours or whatever, money had been transferred into this wallet, when it got to that point, it would now understand, oh wait, now I actually have money in this address, so there's something different going on. But again, I debated whether or not to try to stick money in here so you guys could see it or see it out of the box, but I decided not to.
You can cut everybody's transaction. Seems pretty hackable to me because then you could start looking for algorithms.
Well, so you can definitely do network analysis on this, right?
That
So,
seems dangerous.
and so, right, and that's why if you want to maintain your anonymity, the rule is a different address for every transaction. All right, and you can do transactions with yourself, right? You can send money through multiple addresses in order to clean that up.
So we're at 98 now. Do we have an idea that at the end of this, how large that traffic
I don't. Right, I don't. Well, there's no end, right? It's. I think it just keeps getting bigger.
I mean, they checkpoint it, and then they checkpoint it every so often, and it goes down.
Okay.
Who's that?
Yeah. So if I want to send money, right, I just put in an address. That's a Bitcoin address, and the amount of Bitcoin I want to send, hit send. Right, pretty straightforward.
Who wrote the software?
So this comes from, I don't know who wrote the software, but there are public people associated with Bitcoin.org, right? So there's no Satoshi Nakamoto, but there are developers and people on the forums and people who work with the organization, the nonprofit, to sort of promote this and do that. So I don't know who wrote this software, but that's probably a knowable piece of information. This is not, that's not secret. And there are multiple other wallets that you can get. This is the base wallet that you can get from the organization, so it's the standard, but there are lots of them, and different wallets are better or worse at doing different things. So if I want to receive money, if you look over here, that's the public address. It runs off. So if you guys write that down, feel free to send money to it. I'm entirely acceptable. And obviously, I can label it. I can say, this is the address that I use to get money from this person. This is the address I use on this person. I can export the addresses. I can add a new address. Obviously, just a button creates another public-private key pair. Very simple to just add lots of these. And I can obviously look at the transactions. There aren't any in here.
So each payer or payee can have their own.
Right, I can create as many as I want, and I can send money from myself to myself, right? So that's where you're creating that anonymity.
Oh, by sending self to self, it makes it harder to do what's going on.
To see for someone doing that kind of network analysis to understand what's going on, right? Now, as I say, there's going to be some private information available, right? If I need you to send me money, I have to give you my address. And you now know something, well, that address was Bob, right? The problem is that when I go out and spend that money, it comes out of a different address, most likely. I might not care about my privacy and anonymity, in which case I can just go ahead and spend it. There's no reason I have to switch it to another address, but I can. So obviously, Bitcoin exchanges, someone has to provide that interface for me to buy Bitcoin with dollars, and or exchange Bitcoin back to dollars. Right? Those are money transfer agents. They are regulated. They're all over the world. They will get you in and out of multiple different currencies, including Bitcoin. I'm using one. So the largest is Mt. Gox, MTGOX. Who's heard of Mt. Gox? Anyone know what Mt. Gox stands for? You do, I know. Go ahead, tell them.
Magic the Gathering,
Online exchange, right? Magic. It used to be an exchange that was used for one of these gaming sites, and you could exchange your Magic the Gathering stuff. I don't even know what that is. And that guy sold it out to somebody else. That somebody else decided, oh, why don't we also allow people to exchange in and out of Bitcoin? The Magic the Gathering thing became worthless. The Bitcoin thing took off. Eventually, they sold it to a much bigger company. It's a Japanese company. It's a large commodities concern in Japan now, and but they'd already now had this huge investment in the domain name, so they just left it as Mt. Gox. So there's no Mt. Gox. It's not a mountain. It's Magic the Gathering. But anyway, if you want to use Mt. Gox, they will only accept wire transfers from the United States. That's how you would have to get money in. That's a little bit expensive. If you use a different online exchange that's one in the United States, you could do an ACH transfer directly from your bank account, less expensive for you. So I don't use Mt. Gox. I use a company called Coinbase, but there are 100 of these. So you can pick the one that works best for you. Coinbase is pretty big. But you're going to need some way to go in and out. Use them for your transactions. You probably don't want to leave the money there over any extended life.
So obviously, they hold some kind of Bitcoin for transferring it down. So couldn't I technically come to you and say, hey, Bob, I've got X amount of money. Are you willing to sell me some
Sure.
Bitcoin?
Right. So, and then I could take your cash, you give me your address, and I could send it to you. I could send it from Coinbase to my wallet, and then my wallet to you. Either way, or directly from my Coinbase account. The thing is that there's a security issue with Coinbase, right? It's an online company. If they get hacked, my shit's gone, right? So you leave money out there in these online accounts at your own risk, and the most amount of hacking and losses in Bitcoin have been those, not really the exchanges per se, but these online wallets, right? The exchange obviously comes packaged with an online wallet because they need that place to put the money while it's being transferred.
So, what do you do in order for you to increase value if you are not going to keep them? Because I've heard a lot of people keeping their Bitcoin and they are getting revenue from it. I don't understand how.
Sure. So Bitcoin has a price, right? At any given point in time, one Bitcoin equals X number of dollars, right? About a month and a half ago, that would have been $130 for one Bitcoin, and it fluctuates every minute, right? I mean, it's going up and down all the time. Today, it's at about $385. So in a month and a half, you way more than doubled your money if you just sat on your Bitcoin.
But there is that security risk.
Right. So it could get stolen if you leave it there. Well, you can move it to a wallet. Right now, it's not at the exchange. Obviously, when you're going to sell, you're going to have to put it back at the exchange, but you're only going to put it back there for half a day, and then you're going to sell it. So again, right now, you see my wallet has nothing in it. I've been buying a little bit. It's all in the exchange, but I've also shipped it out to some mining companies. So right now it is still there, but over the long run, I would be moving it back to my wallet.
Earlier you said something about bringing it out. Would that protect it at all?
So it's just a question of how you're going to back it up, right? So there's on my laptop is wallet.dat, right? That is the collection of public-private keys in a file. And if you got that file, you'd have my money, right? So now, what's my level of comfort with having that file on my laptop if I'm walking around? And right now, this laptop, wallet.dat, has 0 Bitcoin in it, right? So I'm pretty comfortable. You're not going to get any money. But let's say I now transfer all of my money from Coinbase into that. I'm walking around with X. Right now I'm walking around, let's say, I own right now about 5 Bitcoin at $380. Let's say it's roughly $2,000, right? So I've roughly $2,000 in Bitcoin, right? You would protect that the way you would protect $2,000, right? So I don't know how many. What?
They have your laptop. They have your money.
Absolutely, right? So so now the bottom line is if I'm walking around with $50 of Bitcoin, right? I probably care more about the laptop, right? It's an $800 laptop. If I'm walking around with $50,000 in Bitcoin, I don't really give a relative, right? I don't care about the laptop anymore. I care about the Bitcoin wallet, right? That's the big deal. Now I can wrap that. I can encrypt it, right? I can do all kinds of other things so that you don't get it. But what about if you, well, okay, you can't get it. What if I can't get it, right? If I don't have those private keys, I don't have the money either, right? It's completely gone, never going to be recovered. So backing up your wallet is a big effing deal. Who here has sold a house? A couple of us, okay. So you sell the house, right? You walked out of closing, right? And they gave you, that 50 to 80 grand check, right?
You hope.
It's like, yeah, so right, you hope. But, so you probably didn't stop off at the bar, to toss a few back on the way to the bank, right? It's like someone gives you even a check for 80 grand, you kind of go right to the bank, right? So everyone has a different level of comfort with moving those big dollar numbers. But again, you're going to protect this based upon your level of comfort. Do you have a question? All right. Okay. I'm running a little bit behind, I think. So this is a big chart about how a Bitcoin transaction works, but the practical bottom line is, I have Bitcoin in an address. I have a private key. I want to send Bitcoin to someone else. They are going to have a public address. I'm going to go into my software or my online wallet or my exchange provider or whatever. I'm going to give them their address and hit send, right? I sign that transaction with my private key so that nobody else can spend it without that private key. And once it's gone, can never be revoked, right? That is a cash transaction. So crypto, so what are the miners doing? Let's talk about mining. So there's a problem. What if I have Bitcoin, it's in an address, we can all verify that this address holds this much Bitcoin, and I want to simultaneously send it to Lost and Spiky. Which one of them gets the money, right? If I simultaneously send the same amount of money to both of them. So that's where mining comes in. Mining is taking the blockchain, taking the transactions for the last 10 minutes, and I'm going to try to use piece of proof of work to try to get to that, to try to find a hash, which is hard to find. It needs to have a certain number of leading zeros. And I'm going to try to find that hash. I'm only going to accept one of those transactions. And the transaction that is in the longer blockchain wins. So effectively, the miners are the ones providing the integrity on the system, preventing fraudulent transactions. And they're doing so by doing a lot of work on the blockchain, and that work becomes hard to reproduce. So if somebody else wanted to introduce into the blockchain a fraudulent transaction or remove a transaction from it, they would have to recreate all of the work done by all of the miners, which would be very hard to do. It's SHA-256K hashing, and basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that if I take all of the power of all of the miners who are mining Bitcoin at any given point in time, I want them roughly to be able to find this hash in 10 minutes. And I want them to do so every 10 minutes. So, so I'm going to adjust the level of work. The way I adjust the level of work is by adjusting the number of bits of leading zeros that need to be at the front end of that hash. If there's more miners doing more work, I have more leading zeros. Need to find a hash that starts with more leading zeros. If miners drop out of the system, I go the other way. So that mining work piece is adjusted. I think it's every 2 weeks. There are transaction fees built into Bitcoin. They are not mandatory, but they do tend to. Paying them will get your transaction into the blockchain, it'll be more likely to get in. And they're very, very small. They're not going to be anything like the fees that you pay to a bank or a credit card company, but largely they prevent what you would call attacks on the system. If I have a lot of transactions of 1/100 millionth of one Satoshi, and I accumulate those up and I try to send a 1 Bitcoin payment to somebody, and basically that is aggregated out of 100 million addresses, that transaction is going to be huge, right? There's the physical kilobytes of that one transaction are going to be large, right? So that's a kind of an attack on the system. It makes everyone have to do more work hashing it, and it makes it harder to verify, and it makes the blockchain grow. So that's a negative for the system. So there's a small fee that's attached to large transactions. There's also a fee attached to very recent transactions. Let's say I send Bitcoin to Joey, and then Joey sends it to Steve, all within the last 10 minutes, right? Well, when Joey sends it, my Bitcoin may have been mature and may have been fairly well down to the blockchain. It's well documented, and it's not. We know that it's legit. When Joey sends it to Steve, it hasn't yet been verified. My transaction to Joey, so that looks like an attack on the system from the perspective of the system. So that's another type of transaction that is attached. There's a small fee attached to that. So there's 5 or 6 categories of types of transactions: large transactions, fast transactions, transactions from a large number of addresses, things like that, that have these relatively small fees attached.
So if you have a Bitcoin that you transferred over, just transferring it over, you can select which Bitcoin you want to move?
Yes. Right. And typically your wallet will do that for you in order to minimize the transaction fees. It'll take the oldest Bitcoin. But if for some reason you didn't want to do that, you can pick like a stock. You could say take exactly these shares. I think we already talked about, is Bitcoin anonymous? No, it's pseudo-anonymous. You can do some attacks on anonymity on this, but it can be anonymous if you need it to be. Obviously, Bitcoin is being accepted more and more places. You can pretty much at this point buy anything with Bitcoin. It is broadly accepted. The marketplace is growing. I think I was going to go to a couple of charts. Yeah. So yeah, you can't put a chart of Bitcoin in the slide anymore and have it actually be up to date. So let's go online and look at this. So this is blockchain.info. It's a nice site that takes data right out of the blockchain. Total Bitcoins in circulation. These are live charts now, right? You can see up here we're approaching 12 million. Number of Bitcoin transactions. So this is from December 12 to November, and you can see a slight uptick in that, but not it's not a huge growth in the number of transactions. Yeah, that was per day, as opposed to total transactions. The market capitalization of all of the Bitcoin. Obviously, as the Bitcoin has risen in the last month in price, obviously the market capitalization has kind of gone off the charts. I want to get to at least the one of dollars. This is the market price in dollars. This is where we are right now. Right, so that thing is just, I've been hitting it on my phone. So each exchange will have a bid and an ask price that's slightly different. So Mt. Gox is currently at $3.90, but every exchange will be slightly different.
So what is the next flip that happens like here?
So what happened here? Good question. Cyprus defaulted on their debt. So this is the Cyprus financial crisis, and everyone got into Bitcoin, and then
people said, let's get out.
Yeah, then they got out.
What's happening right now?
Excellent question. So I looked that up, and near as I can tell, this is a guess, right? Alibaba, which is a big Chinese, the Chinese Amazon, we all agree it was Chinese Amazon. So they decided that they would accept Bitcoin. Now, if you were in the United States and Amazon decided to accept Bitcoin, that'd be kind of good for you, right? That'd be good for business, for the Bitcoin business. But you're not really pressured to get out of dollars. But if you're in China and the Chinese Amazon decides to accept Bitcoin, your currency blows, right? You can't get your currency out of the country. Your government is completely in control. You have a fixed exchange rate. They know everything about you, and you don't want them to, because you're a hostile government, right? If you're in China, you want out of your currency, right? You any way you can. So when Alibaba, the Amazon of China, says I'm going to accept Bitcoin, Chinese are just like, that's it, we're in, right? So I think that's what's going on, right? Is basically we're looking at a bunch of Chinese are getting into Bitcoin big. And this thing can collapse, right? This is very volatile. If this is a stock, this is a high beta stock, and don't put all your money in Bitcoin, right? But right now, you don't have any other asset class in the United States that's performing like this, right? This thing is off the charts, and it's
really at this point, you're almost just waiting for all those people who bought back there to say, and I think we could peak it.
right. So again, it could collapse, right? If it can go up like this, it can go down. But be careful.
Hey, Bob?
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised not to see it go down after Silk Road being taken down in October. Silk Road down grabbing all those bitcoins.
Ah, right. So Silk Road. So does everyone know what Silk Road is? Big website used for selling illegal goods, guns, arms, a lot of drugs.
You said laundering. Pretty much laundering.
Laundering money, sure, all that good stuff. And obviously, people who bought and sold on Silk Road, completely criminal enterprise, were using Bitcoin to anonymize the transactions. The government somehow, right, has broken into that, taken that over, is arresting the people, prosecuting them, seized a bunch of the Bitcoin, right? So the government is now a pretty significant holder of Bitcoin, and you can expect that the U.S. government doesn't need to be in the Bitcoin business. They're going to sell that at some point. That got swamped in these overhang of the Chinese rushing in, right? So I would think that the fact that the government is a big holder, that they're going to sell, and that they shut down Silk Road, probably all negatives for Bitcoin that got overwhelmed by this other thing happening at roughly the same time.
Have there been people know or have there been any estimates as to how much Bitcoin to go for action?
So Runa Sandvik she knows a lot of the addresses. I don't think we absolutely know, but there are specific addresses that are associated with what the government's taken on. So they do know roughly what the government has, and it's a big number, right? I think it's on the order of the 1% of the Bitcoin economy. It's right now currently held by the U.S. Treasury. And as I say,
they're just hoping the price keeps going.
right, it keeps going up, so they're good, right?
Cash in the Bitcoin.
Right.
We're not debt free.
Yeah, so in general, the history of the United States government making good buy-sell decisions is pretty bad, right? They usually sell at the exact worst time.
I would take back a lot of bad things I said about Barack Obama if he showed up with $1 trillion Bitcoin.
Right. That's right. So you can go to blockchain.info. You can download all these charts. Obviously, these are updating in real time. But the bottom line is what they're showing you is this is a growing economy, right? There's growing participation in all levels and all ways, and you can do whatever you want with this. My wallet should be fully updated by now. I'm going to go ahead and close that out. All right, so these are slightly older charts from a couple months ago, but basically the same type of thing. Bitcoin mining. So now I'm over time, so I'm going to try to wrap this up quick. But Bitcoin mining, if you have to process a lot of transactions really fast, and you're looking to get that Bitcoin mining reward, you need to be using the best technology. A CPU can do that transaction, as can a GPU or FPGA, but they're not going to be efficient, and you're going to pay more in electricity than you are going to get in Bitcoin. And that is because the miners, right, a group of people who are professionally doing this and putting millions of dollars into this effort are all using the latest and greatest ASICs chip, and the amount of effort that they're providing relative to your effort means that you're not going to be getting a very high percentage of the Bitcoin. Now, you can go it alone. You can say, I'm going to stand up a machine. I can even buy an ASICs from one of these providers and start mining myself. And you might represent 1/1,000,000th of the mining effort. And therefore, every billion times 10 minutes, you're going to get 2 Bitcoin, right? Which might never happen in your lifetime, right? Effectively, you cannot, this is not how that works, right? You're not looking to do that. What you're going to do is you're going to set up your machine, you're going to run the mining software, you're going to get software that's optimized for your machine, you're going to join a mining pool. That's a whole group of people who are splitting up the work, and their goal is to get 2 Bitcoin, every week or 2. And then you get your percentage of that on a sort of trickling it out on a regular basis, and that's how you're going to make your money back.
So basically, since you can do this in pools, there is the system for mining industry.
Absolutely.
You could, if you want to build essentially a farm of computers to do them.
And that's what people are doing. They are they're standing up racks of these things, and sure, you can get your botnet doing that, Joey.
Yeah, I was thinking about taking advantage of all those devices that were found during the internet since 2012, but reclaim.
Right. Well, if you could hack a bunch of hardware, right? Anything can do this transaction, right? So if you could find a bunch of stuff that you could take over on the internet, you could get that, make the internet your bitch, and put it to work mining Bitcoin for you. And there are botnets, right? This is well known. There are botnets that will infect your computer, take it over, and set it up mining Bitcoin for them, right? And they want your computer up and running all the time, mining their Bitcoin for them, so they're not going to shut you down. Go ahead.
Wouldn't that cause a high security?
Absolutely. The highest. Right, 99. So so there's mining pools. There's also mining contracts, right? Obviously, a fairly efficient way to do this would be rather than buying a box and plugging it in, turning it on, running the software, joining the pool, doing all the rest of this stuff. I just pay someone to do this, right? So Butterfly Labs has a mining contract. MinerLease.com has a mining contract. You send them money in dollars or Bitcoin. You start them mining for you, and they send you Bitcoin. Pretty straightforward. Are you going to make money doing this? Right now, looks like yes. Right? A year from now, when your contract expires, I have no idea. Right? So I would consider all of this to be speculative and risky, but probably an opportunity.
Just another random question. So do the pools divide out evenly, or do they divide out based on percentage of work?
Based on work, right? So they're calculating how much effort you're putting in. So hacking Bitcoin, we've talked a little bit about this. Obviously, we mentioned Bitcoin botnets, popping wallets as well. That's your biggest dollar thing. 2 things that you should know about. Was it the bug? I'm going to get my details right. So originally there was back in, I think it was 2009, August 6th, major vulnerability in the Bitcoin protocol was spotted. Transactions weren't being properly verified before they were included in the blockchain or the transaction log. A week later, that vulnerability was exploited. 184 billion Bitcoins were generated in one transaction and sent to 2 addresses. Well, obviously that's wrong,
Jesus,
right?
Steal the Bitcoin, don't be that.
Right, don't be an ass, right? Just steal a little bit.
Yes.
So the community got together, froze Bitcoin transactions, froze the blockchain, removed the bad transaction, regenerated the blockchain, and fixed the bug, and then started back up again, right? But we were talking about whether or not you could, as a community, come together and delete a transaction. Sure, they did it, right? The fork was another one. was at March 12th of 2013. A Bitcoin miner running 0.8.0 created a very large transaction which was not compatible with the previous version of the software. This was a legitimate transaction. That created two diverging blockchains. One blockchain had the big transaction in it. Another blockchain did not have the transaction in it. That's not good. You cannot have two diverging blockchains. They shut everything down. They put the transaction, they merged the two transaction streams or blockchains together, fixed the software, turned it back on again.
But just the they in that is bitcoin.org?
Yeah, so bitcoin.org, and that would require the entire community to get together, stop mining, right? Stop mining, shut everything down, and get it back together, right? And as this becomes bigger and bigger, that gets harder and harder to do.
So it's right now the bitcoin.org is the main governing body of their repertoire.
So yeah, so I wouldn't go for governing body, right? Organizing, maybe. Place where people can go to do it. They're responsive to the United States government, and when the U.S. government has a question about what are you guys doing, whatever, they're talking. But yeah, that's pretty much all you have. And when as those transactions per day become more and more rapid, the velocity of transactions increases. You can't just shut it down. Right? It's like we've had a little problem with the U.S. economy. We'd like you all to stop spending money for a day, right? Because we're just going to work out some bugs, and then we'll get you back online. It's like you can't do that, right? So it's an issue. Hopefully, the community is now also more responsive and more aware of, let's say, availability as an issue, but it's a risk, right? So anyone know Len Sassaman? Heidi's nodding her head. So Heidi probably knows the story better than I do, but I'll tell it anyway. So Dan Kaminsky and Travis Goodspeed did a little tribute to Len Sassaman, who was a cypherpunk friend who passed away. They created a transaction. This is not that long ago. Actually, I don't have the date on here, but I think this is 2013, 12 or 13. All right, 12. So they crafted a very special transaction where they sent it the to address for multiple pieces of Bitcoin. The two addresses that they were sending to effectively built out this ASCII art. So in this transaction, which comes right out of the Bitcoin chain, is this picture of Len Sassaman, and this was so this was the tribute to them. There's some text in here about Len, the rabbi, called him the rabbi, and then they included ASCII art of Ben Bernanke as well. So so all of Bitcoin, every transaction of Bitcoin is completely dependent upon the existence of Ben Bernanke's face right now. Because he cannot be removed from the Bitcoin blockchain, right? It's removing this breaks everything. So
somehow got in there as part of the algorithm.
So what they did is they manipulated who they were sending the money to. So they sent it to an address that created that. Now, since that address doesn't exist, right? Effectively, they vaporized that Bitcoin, which at the time was $15, but not a big deal, but yeah, it's permanently in there, and but there is no private key for this address, right? Because it's not a real address; it's a bunch of ASCII art. But effectively, but it cannot be removed from the blockchain, as no transaction can be removed from the blockchain. So Ben Bernanke and Len Sassaman are in there. We were talking last night also about it's like, well, what if we included child porn in the blockchain? Would we all have child porn on our computers? So no one's obviously done that yet. And this is probably the level.
How do you know?
Well, so people watch it, right? But this is probably the level of artwork that you could get in there. But you could theoretically do the same type of hack and include marketing material. You could include a web address. something along those lines. So, yeah, I think this is interesting from the perspective of the first people to do it, right? This was an interesting hack. You do it again, it's just derivative and copying, right? Nobody cares, right? It's boring. So the risks to Bitcoin, and I'm almost done. There are multiple Bitcoin competitors. Litecoin is probably the biggest one. It is the biggest one. And it is a fraction of the size of Bitcoin. Some people would say Bitcoin's a Ponzi scheme. I don't think it is. If you look up sort of how a Ponzi scheme works, this is not how that works. It may still be regulated, which would obviously be a big deal. I'm almost done, Adrian.
That's okay. You can that's lunch break anyway.
And we also have, and it could be made illegal, right? The United States government or any government could just say it's illegal, that's it, right? Thailand is the only country right now where it is actually illegal. And talked to some people in Thailand, and the crux said, yeah, illegal in Thailand is sort of a shade of gray, right? If you're willing to pay for it, anything is legal in Thailand. So, but right now, technically, Bitcoin is illegal. And so in terms of the future of money, I'd like to leave you guys with two things. You want to start thinking about sort of where all of this fits for you, right? Is Bitcoin a solution to some of the money problems that we see in the U.S. currency? Is this sort of the wave of the future? Do you need to be jumping on this bandwagon? What's the right way to think of it? Is Bitcoin a currency, or is it a commodity that would be bought and sold? What I would encourage you to do, as you're thinking about that issue and being a little bit more aware of it than hopefully you were when you came in, get your feet wet. Right? This is my suggestion, is don't take 20 grand and put it in there, or whatever 20 grand is to you, right? For some people, $500 is a lot of money, right? And so I'm not suggesting you put whatever is big money for you into this. What I'm suggesting is you put in for what is for you small money, right? Take, lunch for a day or two, 10, 20 bucks, open an account, buy some Bitcoin, download the wallet, transfer it from the address, transfer it back, do all of those things that make you feel comfortable with the economy and how it works and how it got spent. Make a mistake, right? Blow it up. Don't back up your system, and you'll realize here's what it is, what the problems were. Make those mistakes when it's not a lot of money, right? But learn what you need to learn, because this thing's probably coming, right? This is probably going to be bigger, and as the early adopter, you are in a position to benefit, but figure it out, right? Learn what you can about how the thing works. I used to tell people this about Twitter and social media, right? Don't figure out how you're going to market your business on Twitter. Just get on Twitter, follow some people, and start participating in the conversation, right? Just learn how things work, right? What the F is a hashtag, how do I do these different things, and then you can figure out how can I manipulate that system and how can I use it to my benefit. But Bitcoin right now, get in with a little bit of money, figure out how to do transactions, download the software, and then you'll be in a position later on to ramp it up and see what happens. Right now, I bought a bunch of Bitcoin. I'm doing very well on it. It could collapse tomorrow, and with the amount of money that I have into it, I'd be entirely okay with that, right? I'm more interested in the data and the learning. I have spent a little bit of money with Butterfly Labs for a mining contract. I'm also going to send some money to Miner Lease for a mining contract, and that'll take a year. It'll take at least 6 months before I really start to know whether or not that was working or not working, or how well did it go. But my goal there is not really to try to make so much money as it is to try to learn how to make money, how this works. So that's where I'm at. Any questions? Yep.
Does the software have any vulnerabilities that are known about yet?
So far, no. Right. So far, encryption looks good, and no one's hacking the software directly. Those online services are the problem.
That's what they said, though. With the NSA.
Right. So I'm not saying that there aren't any. I'm just saying I'm not aware of any. Right. Yeah.
So with the government getting as much as they did, is there any really concern about what they're doing with the algorithms?
So if I was buying a stock and I knew that in 2 months the CEO was going to be allowed to sell 1% of the company, which was currently locked in. In other words, there was an overhang on the market, and I had a date. I knew what date it was going to be overhang. And I don't know that he's going to sell on that date, but I know he could sell on that date. 1% is not really big enough for me to worry about on a stock, right? Anything like that is going to be priced in, at least at the New York Stock Exchange, priced into the stock already, right? Everyone knows that date, and everyone knows what the situation is. So I'm not particularly worried with the U.S. government, but it is an event, right? It is something that's going to happen.
It's more from the technical perspective of if they're able to, quote, reverse engineer it to figure out things that shouldn't be figured out.
Right. So if anyone figures out the crypto that underlies this, right, and can create private keys from public keys, game over, right? That person, theoretically, if they wanted to maximize their return, would start stealing small amounts of money to begin with. Because if they just stole all of Bitcoin, it would instantly be worthless and they'd have no money, right? So I have to sort of, how much can I steal before somebody notices that I'm stealing shit, right? And probably what I would do is I'd go back, not that I've given this any thought, but what I'd go back and I'd look at public keys which have been holding Bitcoin for a long time, right? They're most likely lost, right? And no one's watching them. There have been no transactions, right? And I'd go steal those, cash them in, and see how long I can run that. But it's literally as soon as it's broken, if I'm the one who broke it, I know the whole economy is going down. It's just a matter of time. And as soon as the jig is up, Bitcoin goes to zero, and it's worthless tool
so
for me.
That's why you take in and you immediately cash into something
Right.
that's more stable, like the dollar.
Exactly, right. But you can only do that, again, until someone knows. But here's the other thing. I think we were talking about this last night. If you figure out how to generate public-private key pairs for Bitcoin, stealing Bitcoin is not your first thing to do, right? You've also broken all of crypto, right, for everybody. So yeah, maybe one of the ways you monetize that is stealing Bitcoin, right? But you're stealing every secret everywhere, right? Yeah, it's the sneakers thing, right? No more secrets. So yeah, you might worry about the Bitcoin part, but you may have bigger fish to fry. And largely that probably comes up right as if we get to quantum crypto, which I think is probably further out than more people think it is. But if you get to quantum crypto where you can start breaking these public keys, then you just need to fix all of the crypto behind Bitcoin and keep it going forward.
Are you aware of any ASIC boxes that seem to be worth the initial price and the power consumption?
Yeah, so the problem is that you have to think about it as a model over time, right? So in other words, there's an upfront investment in the box. I have to get in the delivery chain, which is long, right? There's a huge delay between they don't order a box and get it shipped, right? It's a huge chain. You have to wait 4 months. You don't know. The variables include the price of Bitcoin over the time that you're going to be mining it, right? How long the technology is going to persist, and how many other people are mining at what rate. And you don't know any of that information, right? So you're going to make some assumptions of that, come up with sort of a model that you think makes sense, and then you go backwards and say, so should I buy the box or not, right? And right now, I think if you do that with the ASICs, right, you probably are going to generate a model which says, yes, you could buy the boxes. That mining right now looks to be profitable, right? But if everyone does that, right, that's the action that makes it unprofitable, right? You'll drive the margin to zero, and then that'll be it. So not exactly clear to me, the bottom line is, you guys are kind of on the cutting edge, right? So hacking is about attitude and approach, right? It is not about secret knowledge, right? But that having been said, you guys do have some secret knowledge, right? You know what Bitcoin is, and no one else that you know does, right? They don't have a clue what you're freaking talking about. So, so it may take a long time for a Wall Street banker to say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to put 50 million into Bitcoin miners, and I'm going to demolish the margin." Right now, the margin looks pretty good, but eventually that will happen, right? It's a question is how long of a tail that has, and I have no way of, no one has any way of knowing, right?
When you transfer from one currency to Bitcoin to another currency, or even the same currency, is it taxed based on growth, or is it? Just
that's a good question. There are transaction fees at the exchanges, right?
No,
so,
I know that.
Right.
I'm just talking about tax by the country.
So how each country would tax a transaction would be a function of the country. In the United States, I would say that that transaction is most like, and you have to be sort of make a rational guess, most like I traded into a different currency and then I traded back out. You have not created any income. Now, if you were doing a Forex transaction, a foreign exchange transaction, and you bought X amount and then came back into dollars, and you made a profit, you'd have a capital gain on that transaction. That capital gain is income to you. It is reportable as a capital gain. So I would say that largely that's what you're looking at, right? I'm keeping a spreadsheet of all of my transactions because this shit will get complex, right? And I trade stocks, right? I mean, I know how to report capital gains in stocks, right? Problem is, it's like, okay, so I went from dollars to Bitcoin, then I have an increase in the value of the Bitcoin. I took the Bitcoin and I bought a mining contract, and I made it go away, right? Now I don't own that Bitcoin anymore. Now Bitcoin comes in. The Bitcoin that theoretically that comes in is income off of the original transaction that I made. So I have to be able to run that whole circle in order to be able to calculate the quote gain that I have, was gain off of these dollars. So if you can't fully document that whole series, then you have a problem, right? You're going to have a paperwork nightmare, right? If all you're doing then is buying a CD on Amazon, then you probably just bought something, and there's no taxable transaction related, even if the Bitcoin maybe went up in price before you bought it. I think if I took $30 and bought Bitcoin and it went up and became worth $60, and then I bought $60 worth of goods, but I paid for it using the Bitcoin, and then the goods came in, I would think, well, I had $30 and now I have the goods. I have $60 worth of goods. I don't think I'd have to report the plus 30 in the inside, but hey, the IRS is not on this shit yet, right?
At that point, you'd be taxed on where your initial $30 came from.
Right. Right. I'm assuming we've already paid whatever that was, right? But yeah, the IRS could say, well, no, you had a $30 capital gain on the Bitcoin, and then you bought some stuff with the 60, but you owe us the income on the 30. But again, they are not on that shit yet. They're not anywhere close to being able to define this. And when they do, they'll either define it as a stock or as a currency, or they'll just say you don't owe anything until you come back into dollars, right? I mean, they're watching it, they're aware of it, but Bitcoin is a speck on their ass at this point, right? It's not a significant economy, but I think it's gonna get there. All right, thanks, guys.